Whether you're hitting the road or kicking back in the cab, it's time to take a load off with Big Rig Banter. Powered by AllTruckJobs.com, your source for finding the trucking jobs drivers really want. Get ready to shift into gear and let the conversations roll.
Hello and welcome. This is the 12th episode of Big Rig Banter. I'm your co-host, Connor Smith.
And I'm your co-host, Troy Diffenderfer.
Today's date is February 7th, 2018, and that means we're a week out from Valentine's Day.
And that's right, ladies and gents. Love is in the air, and our podcast episode today is all about finding love on the road, keeping the love alive, and kind of maintaining that spark.
Absolutely. This episode, we're going to feature a lot of great interviews from people dating in the trucking industry, dating truckers who are actively working in the industry, as well as an owner of a popular trucking dating website on how you can connect with people online. But first, let's get into some news topics.
All right, folks, you know it wouldn't be a proper Big Rig Banner episode if we didn't mention ELDs, of course. It's been the hot button subject for about 6 months now. But it's also opening the door for other new technologies to kind of better the logistics of the trucking industry as a whole. This article we're reading from trucks.com covers the freight matching technology that has kind of become more prevalent, and it's supposed to replace the traditional freight broker. Right now, there are over 12,000 brokers in the U.S., and for more than 50 years, loads have been primarily booked through traditional brokers via phone, fax, and email. And these kind of brokers are going out of style, pretty much. The broker systems are fragmented and inefficient now, and these new load boards are beginning to take their place. Initially, load boards were very basic and weren't as popular as they are now, but they're gaining these key characteristics like price discovery. You can now close the transaction on them, and the user experience is much better. And another great point is they're allowing a new wave of transparency. Your customers and company can see all your transactions, and you can see how much you're paying, what the price is like. You can compare it with your competitors. So it's another great aspect of these new load boards.
And so how are these load boards being accessed? Is it a desktop? Is it an app? Is it, through the ELDs themselves? How?
That's what's great. You can access them via phone, desktop, app. There's tons of great ways to keep everyone in the loop out there, and many truckers are citing it's such a great thing, especially the smaller or medium companies, those that are owner-operators. They can find loads right there on their phone and go haul them the next day. And many small truckers are really enjoying that because they're not paying these brokers, and they're not having to go through a middleman to kind of find freight to make their living. And it's more than just a platform. It's becoming a marketplace, and it's a way to make sure loads are delivered properly. So I think this is something we should watch out in the future. I think it's something that will become standard for many trucking companies, small and large. We'll see some brokers, I'm sure, but I think especially for owner-operators and small trucking businesses, we'll see them use these load boards as a way to kind of increase the logistics and save some money.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll definitely have to keep an eye on this one. All right, and so now we're on to our main topic for the episode, finding love on the road. That's maintaining a relationship on the road and keeping the romance alive when you're a truck driver. So the first place to start, the most logical place to start, is how do you find a relationship on the road? If you're working long hours and you're not in one location for too long of a period of time, it can be difficult to really start a relationship and keep one established over time. And that's what we were kind of hearing from a lot of people in the trucking industry, people either on our Lover's Lane post on AllTruckJobs.com or just people that we know personally. It's difficult to sustain a serious relationship as a trucker at times.
So Connor and I were brainstorming different ways that people date in this generation, and we basically put them into two categories. There's the old-fashioned way, how our parents and grandparents met, and that could be running into each other at a bar or a restaurant, and then the kind of new millennial way that we grew up on, and that's the digital age of the Tinders and the dating apps and such. But Connor, why don't you take the old-fashioned way? I know you did some research in and kind of spoke to some people about ways truckers can kind of meet face-to-face and how to kind of spark a relationship from that way.
Right, so the old-fashioned way, I guess we would just categorize, as you said, Troy, as being, meeting people in real-life situations. It can be in a truck stop, at a restaurant, at a location that you're currently staying at during a haul or whatever, but it can still happen. You don't need to facilitate things through the electronic means. So how does it happen? What are the mechanics behind such a thing? It's all about being there in the moment, being present, and just sort of meeting people in real life. So you guys know what that's about. You know how that works. It's more or less just a natural process of human interaction.
Yeah, and it's important to be open and honest. We realize that this kind of organic type of relationship is especially difficult for someone who lives their life on the road, because you're going to be meeting people every day, meeting different people, and not being able to spend a lot of time with them. And that's why I think being open and honest up front and kind of really letting things happen at their own pace is really crucial. But that's kind of why the online option is a better option for many truckers. I know it's hard to believe, but back in the day, I did my fair share of online dating, Connor. But there's a ton of different online options for truckers. In this millennial age, with everyone having a phone at their hip at any time, this is the route that many truckers and many over-the-road travelers are going for. And that's why there's apps like Tinder and Bumble, where you can find a potential mate at a moment's notice, or the more traditional websites like eHarmony or Match.com. And there's even some trucker-based dating websites, and that includes TruckerFriendsDate.com and TruckerPassions.com. And fortunately, we were able to talk with the owner, Mike, of Trucker Passions, and he was able to shed some insight and even tell a few stories about people finding love through his website. So let's give that a listen.
All right, so we're here with Michael from Passions Network, who operate the TruckerPassions.com. And Mike, thanks for coming on the show. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. And so, Mike, you're the owner of Trucker Passions, is that right? And the Passions Network?
Yeah, I'm the owner of Passions Network, and it is a network of 260 individual online dating and social networking sites.
So our first question is, how did Trucker Passions start? Maybe a better question is, how did Passions Network start in general?
Well, I created an online dating directory in 2002 called agreaterdate.com. And, that's going back 16 years now. And it was back when the online dating marketplace was kind of consolidated into the one-size-fits-all type of dating site. The large players like Match, and there were probably 3 or 4 others back then, but, so much has changed in the last 15 years. But there was beginning to be a split where sites were beginning to, in order to try and fight the big guys. You saw the creation of JDate for the Jewish community and gay.com for the gay community. So there began to be kind of a break-off of individual niche dating sites focused on specific groups. And so that's when I created the dating directory, where basically I was listing all these different categories. and and there were a lot of sites that were being created around that time. So the directory got to be a couple hundred pages of different types of sites. So decided that it made more sense to focus on actually building a dating network, rather than just a dating directory. Trucker Passions was one of those, because even back in 2004, there were a few, maybe 2 or 3 sites that were focused on trying to connect truckers online, although there might have been more like forums as opposed to full-blown dating sites. So I think kind of got the jump on things then.
So do you have any specific stories of truckers finding love using your website, or what's kind of some of the feedback you've gotten from truckers that do use this social network?
Well, actually kind of an interesting story. The trucker, he originally joined a different site in the network, and funny enough, it was kind of an unusual site, I think, for truckers. It was cosplaypassions.com, which is not, it's not something you would expect most truckers to be into, but, everybody's different. And this particular trucker was, he's into cosplay and trucking, and I don't know, he probably had 4 or 5 other sites in his account. And the woman that joined into the network, I don't remember what her original site was, but she had probably 5 or 6 sites in her account, and the only site that the two shared in common was Trucker Passions. But the way the network works is when you're logged in on all the sites in your account, and so you can see all the other people who are logged in and share sites in common. So these two, you kind of stumbled across each other because they both had the Trucker Passion site in their sites, in their account rather, and started up a conversation and ended up hitting it off, and she ended up meeting with him and riding, cross country. And I'm not sure where their relationship has ended at this point, but at the time that they contacted us and said, hey, we found love, and this is what's happening. They were pretty happy. So, and anybody that's interested, that Trucker Passion is free. So any of your listeners that are truckers or related to the trucking industry who are interested in whether it's romance or friendship or just talking about trucks, they can join for free. You don't have to join in order to read this particular testimonial. They can just go to help and go down to the success stories area and find the one that says Trucker Passions, and you'll be able to read what it says.
Awesome. That's a great point to make, is that, a relationship isn't necessarily built on one, interest, or even in this case, one dating site or forum or page, even on throughout your network. So that's a really cool kind of, testimonial to share, because it's, people can look, they can find the love in unexpected places, right? So
yeah, people are not, one-dimensional. Somebody who drives a truck is not, just a trucker. That person has a lot of other interests. And the underlying concept of the network is that it should be easier to break the ice if you share something in common. So, it could be for the people who join Trucker Passions, and a lot of people, most of the people who sign up in the network do end up adding a number of other sites into their account. You don't have to, it's completely optional, but the majority of 260 sites are available to be added for free. There are some sites that if you want to add them, you do upgrade. But it does allow people to kind of express their individuality, by virtue of the sites that they add into their account. And, they run the gamut from, sites you would expect based on religion and location, sexual orientation, politics, those types of things. And then we kind of veer the weird and quirky as well, with sites like Zombie Passions. If you're really into The Walking Dead, that's a great site to have in your account because it's really easy to break the ice with somebody else who's into zombies by sending them a message, when The Walking Dead premieres and saying, hey, what did you think about that show or that episode? And, so the whole concept of the network is really to try and make it easier for people to connect instead of just that weird, like, how do I say hello to, hey, how are you doing? That's boring.
Right. So our next question, being in this industry, in the online kind of dating world for so long, how do you feel that technology has impacted, whether it be cyber relationships, long-distance relationships, or just meeting people online in general?
That's a good question. I mean, you guys are both young, so you don't really remember, but back when I started the dating directory and then ultimately Passions Network, 10, 15 years ago, online dating was kind of viewed negatively. The first couple of years, somebody were to tell you that they were on an online dating site, they were probably laughed at a little, like, you must be desperate, or what's wrong with you? You can't meet people in the real world. And,
right.
The vast majority of people now, I think, are meeting online for a lot of reasons. It's convenient. It opens up access to meeting people that you wouldn't have run into in the real world. And that's particularly related to, truckers who, if you're on the road for 10 hours, 12 hours sometimes, and you're, wherever you are, you're only there for a short period of time before you turn around and, head out on a different route, that doesn't really make it easy for you to establish a strong relationship with someone,
right.
If you're constantly on the go. So I think, the benefit of technology is that, it's allowing people to interact and begin to get to know one another, even if they aren't in the same location. And, after you've, sent a couple of email messages and, FaceTime or Skype and gotten a sense of each other, you kind of build up a sense of, some sort of a relationship, whether it be friendship or more. Then maybe it makes sense that you would make the effort to meet in person, or, even if your location, your home base isn't right next door to the person that you've established a connection with, maybe you build up enough of a time that it's worth it. So,
yeah, that's pretty amazing, actually. It's really changing the way that it all kind of functions, even though we have these very basic human relationship needs and all of that. So it's cool to see it kind of take on the next steps, Yeah. But so then, do you have any tips you could give our listeners if they do want to start using any number of your sites?
Well, again, since, the focus of your podcast is for the trucking industry, I'd tell any of the single truckers out there to sign up. It's free. I think more often you log in, the more likely you are to have success, just because you appear on the homepage. You appear more active in the network, so you're more likely to be seen by other people. So I guess, whether it's joining my site or another trucker dating site, there's a link at the top in the navigation on my site that says dating sites, and there's 6 other online dating sites focused on the trucking industry. So regardless of what trucker dating site your listeners would join, I would just recommend that if you're going to jump in and try this, my recommendation would be to stick with it and try and be kind of proactive. Fill out a good profile. put a picture in there. Most people aren't going to be interested in looking at a profile or interacting with someone who doesn't bother to upload a photo. That's kind of obvious these
Makes
days.
sense.
Yeah. And then just log in regularly and don't be afraid to initiate contact. A lot of people will create accounts and, the old concept of build it and they will come, that's not the way to do it. You create an account and then, reach out, start some conversations. And, within Trucker Passions, there's a whole set of groups, which is kind of a subset within the site, and it allows members to kind of spell out, what type of trucker they are, what type of truck they drive. If they're not a trucker, if they're in the industry, how or what they're doing. Or if they're a trucker groupie, so to speak. There's plenty of men and women in the site who have had relationships with truckers in the past, and so they understand the time constraints. And there's some real stress and pressure in the trucking industry that kind of grow out of the fact that you're on the road so much and traveling so much.
Absolutely.
So, finding somebody who gets that, just automatically don't have to worry that you're going to start dating someone and then they're going to freak out because, you have to be gone for 2-3 days, if not more. So that's one of the benefits to trucker specific dating site is, the people that are on there, they already know what it means to be a trucker and the ramifications of being related to this trucking industry. So
Right on. Well, Mike, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us here. We really appreciate it. It's a lot of great information. And before we go, is there anything else you'd like to let our listeners know?
I would just invite everybody to check it out. And if they're single, these 2 months, January and February, tend to be the most popular for online dating. So this is really, rather well timed.
Absolutely, yeah, no doubt. Well, again, that's Michael of TruckerPassions.com and PassionsNetwork.com. Mike, thanks so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. All right, well, thanks a lot, guys.
All right, so again, a lot of great information there via Mike from PassionsNetwork.com. It was cool to hear how people aren't just truckers when they sign up for these websites. They have all these different interests, and sometimes the interests that they bond over don't even have anything to do with trucking. So that's really something to consider, is when you're looking for somebody else, when you're looking for a significant other, to consider that, people are incredibly complex beings and they have many overlapping interests. So don't just typecast yourself to one person or one type of person who you're ideally seeking out. Get the full spectrum and try to make connections in maybe ways you didn't expect, because they can lead to very fulfilling and long-lasting relationships.
Yeah, I think if there's one thing we can take away from this, it's that cosplay leads to everlasting love.
I wouldn't go that far just yet, but in that particular instance, yeah, it sometimes it does. But sometimes forming a relationship on the road does happen the good old-fashioned way. It happens in real life and in person, and the people in those relationships just so happen to be truckers. And so our next couple of interviews are going to take two perspectives here, one of a married driver who's still working, and another of someone dating a trucker.
Yeah, and you might recognize our first guest. He has a familiar voice. You might have heard him on one of our earlier podcasts or even his own podcast, TruckerDump. I'm talking about Todd McCann, and Todd has actually been married for quite some time and even trucked with his wife as a team driver for multiple years. Right now, his wife is currently at home while Todd remains on the road, and we had the chance to chat with Todd about what it's like maintaining a relationship with someone who's back at home while he's on the road. And here's that interview.
So I'm here with Todd McCann of the podcast TruckerDump, and we're here to talk about everything relationship on the road today. Todd, how's it going?
Pretty good. Glad to be with the Big Rig Banner boys.
Absolutely, yeah. It's always a pleasure to have you. So we know that you affectionately call your wife the evil overlord. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So how did you and your wife first meet?
We met, man, I think I was like maybe 17 or something like that. She was like 14. And we went to the same church. I didn't know her that well back then, but, you know, she was just this cute little thing that I would flirt with now and then. And, you know, and she ended up moving away just a couple of years later. And she was gone for most of her high school years. And probably when she was 19 or 20, she moved back to our area. And she stupidly looked me up to find out what was up to with me. And she's been stuck with me ever since.
That's awesome. So then how did you guys kind of get involved in trucking as a team? How long from when you guys first started dating until you started working together?
Yeah, well, us dating and working together is two different things, really. We actually dated for 3 years, and once we got married, we actually started working together at some other jobs before we got into trucking.
Okay.
Yeah, we worked at Ticketmaster for a while, you know, selling tickets to people, and we both worked there. And there was one other job, I can't remember where it was, but yeah, we worked together quite a bit, so it was not strange that we got into trucking together. But I think it was probably about 5 years total from when we, you know, got back together that we actually started trucking together. And the reason we got into trucking was because we actually wanted to go to school, which sounds weird, but we wanted to go to college, and we just couldn't afford it. You know, we just needed to pay off some bills before we moved and started class. And we just thought, well, we'll just truck for a couple of years. We'll just team truck and knock it out and get these bills done. And, well, you can see I'm still here 20 years later. So that didn't work out as planned.
So did she go back to school then? I know you're trucking solo now. What did she end up pursuing?
She got off the truck about 9 years ago, and she was working for her aunt. Her aunt owns like a dance company where they travel around and do, you know, dance contests and stuff like that.
Cool.
And she was working for that, keeping the scores and all that kind of stuff. And but she always knew she was going to go back to school. So she's back in school now, and she's going for the nursing program. So she's in school right now. She's not loving it, I can tell you that. But you know, it's hard to love school when you're our age, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. I think maybe at any age it's kind of hard to love school, but
that's true. That's very true. Yeah.
So, what was the team driving experience like? Is that something you would recommend to other people starting out in their careers or with a significant other?
Teaming is hard. There's so many people who go into this thinking, well, I'll just team up with any old Joe and, you know, we'll make a go of it. And I do not recommend that. I think if you're going to have a successful team, you really need to know that person, not intimately, so to speak, but you need to know them very, very well. You know, maybe a best friend, you know, maybe a brother or a sister or something like that. You know, somebody you know, and you know all their little quirks, and it's not going to bug the crap out of you when, you know, they do their little quirks that would bug anyone else. You know, you're just going to let it slide. I think too many people jump into these team relationships, and I know a lot of trucking companies now, they actually force you into a team situation right out of training.
Oh, wow.
And I understand why they do that, but you know, that's to help each other out in the first few weeks, and that makes sense. But I would not recommend staying with that person unless you just really, really click. You know, and there's just a lot of people that, you know, they're looking for a mate to drive with. They don't, you know, they don't even know this person, but they're just like, hey, I want to get a girl to team with. Maybe I'll hook up with her too while I'm at it. And it's like, boy, I've heard so many horror stories about that, you know. So yeah, it's a very hard thing to do, to team with somebody, because you're with them. I mean, you think about it, like these overlords now are out for 3 weeks at a time, and you know, we're pretty much within 5 feet of each other 24 hours a day. You know, the only separation we really have is when we're showering, we always like to get separate showers just for a little space.
Sure.
You know, and it's kind of strange too, though, because it's like the only job you could be with somebody 24 hours a day and not talk to them, because, you know, one's sleeping while the other's driving, you know. So you really have to make the most of those times when you're both down, you know, you have some downtime.
So what kind of advice would you give those who are trying to maintain a relationship while on the road, whether it's team trucking with them or whether their significant other is at home?
Well, I'd tell you what, I've heard so many guys out here who have divorce stories, and often multiple divorce stories. I mean, it's not easy to maintain a relationship out here on the road. And I don't think guys make it any better with the way they act sometimes. I'm going to say something here that probably people don't want to hear, but just don't cheat on your spouse. You know, there's a lot of that going on out here, because we can get away with anything we want out here. Nobody's really going to know, you know, and guys do things that they shouldn't be doing, and that doesn't help. And even if you're not cheating, so to speak, if you're spending a lot of time at porn shops and your wife is aware of this, I don't care how cool of a wife she is, she's not really cool with it. That's coming straight from the evil overlord, you know. That's one advantage of having a wife who is not shy about telling you, you know, her opinion about things. But she's like, you know, if you're in porn shops or you're watching porn out on the road, all I'm thinking is that she's better looking than me. You're out there doing things you shouldn't be. I'm not with you. Now you're with this person, even though you're not physically with them. It's just it makes them feel smaller, and that's the last thing you want to do to someone when they are away from you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's a big thing. You just have to really work on the relationship in order to make it work. I mean, you got to stay in constant communication with them. You need to go home regularly. You can't be one of these truckers who stays out for 6 and 8 weeks and then expect your marriage to last, you know, and especially if you have kids, that's not going to help matters any, you know, but you gotta try to be there for the things that are important, you know. We always haven't been great at that, but we were teaming, so we were together, so, you know, we didn't really care. You know, if you have to spend your anniversary on the road and eat an iron skillet, then, you know, instead of Olive Garden or something, then, hey, that's what you got to do. But it's just really hard. You just really need to, you know, focus on keeping in touch with them as much as you can, especially through, you know, FaceTime, Skype, that kind of a thing where you actually get some actual FaceTime with the person and you're not just talking to them. I got kind of lucky that the evil overlord is not one of these overly sensitive women, as probably her name represents. But, you know, she's not super, you know, she doesn't have low self-esteem. She doesn't need to talk to me every single day, you know, and she doesn't need me to constantly reassure her of everything. She's just fine. And it probably helps that, you know, she was on the road with me for 9 years. So, you know, she can do without me for a couple days. So, you know, we do a lot of texting. I try to use the Siri, by the way, going down the road. So I'm not texting down the road. But yeah, I just think it's very, very easy to live a separate life out here as a trucker. You almost forget. And then what's going on back home. And then when you do go home, there's a sense that you're almost not a part of it. You know, that their life is going on when you're at home, and then you're out on the road, and you come home and you almost feel like you're not part of that anymore. And the longer you stay out, the worse it gets. That make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds kind of like trust is a big sort of thing to establish. That's what we've been hearing from a lot of other people we've been talking to about relationships on the road, and they just kind of say that, you know, as long as you can build a trustworthy relationship, that's one of the backbones, really, that keeps things moving forward. Yeah,
exactly. But how do you do that when you're on the road?
Right.
You see what I mean? That's what makes it so hard, is if you don't know this person going into this whole thing before you even start, how is that going to end well? You know, if you haven't established that trust with that other person beforehand, it never seems to lead anywhere good. I mean, I do have friends. I do have a friend who looked for a woman, for a teammate, and they drove together and they got married, and they've been married for quite a few years, and they have 2 kids, and they're very happy. But I have heard way more stories that just ended in horrible things where they were trying to ditch their partner in a different city, just get out of the truck, dump them at the nearest terminal. And it's rarely pretty because you don't know the person and there's no trust, like you say.
Right. That could be problematic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you, any advice, you could give people who are looking to start a relationship if they're already in the trucking business? Like maybe where are some places they can meet other people on the road, or how can they connect with people on the road?
I guess there's some trucking dating sites out there I have heard of.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how, being a guy who's been married for 24 years and who doesn't, who doesn't really, I'm not really in that scene, but
True.
I guess some of those probably work. I don't know how else you'd do it. You know, I mean, if you're stopping into a local dive bar someplace out on the road and you expect to meet the woman that you're going to be with for the rest of your life, I think that's probably not a very good plan.
Yeah.
At least for the people I know, it's never worked out very well. So I guess the best thing would just be to try to meet people, casually online, I guess, Facebook. Maybe you've seen a trucker that you follow on Twitter and you think she's, decent looking or whatever, and you start, maybe trying to talk to her a little bit there and just get to know each other. I mean, used to I would have said, well, social media, that's not going to work. You're never going to be able to know them very well. But, nowadays, some of my best friends that I have in my life I met from Twitter or through TruckerDump, my podcast, or through my Slack groups or something like that, So there is a chance to build a good relationship there, but man, it takes a lot longer, and you don't really know what you're getting. People can so easily spoof what they can pretend to be something that they're not online.
Definitely.
But then you get in a truck with them and you find out, oh God, what did I get into? So the Evil Overlord and I often talk. We just had a 24th wedding anniversary, and we were just sitting there thinking, we just said to each other, thank God we have made this thing work and we're not trying to do the dating scene today. I just cannot imagine how awful it must be today. But I wish everybody luck. It's horrid to me.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the Evil Overlord, I know this podcast is going to be out in February, and Valentine's Day is going to be right around the corner. So what's the most romantic thing you've ever done for your wife?
Oh boy! Wow.
Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, our relationship, we're best friends, and we have been pretty much ever since we got together. And it's just, I don't know, she's just not one of those. I mean, her name is the Evil Overlord. So, flowers, she considers flowers a waste of money. How cool is that? I mean, and then if I buy her chocolate, she's like, what, are you trying to make me fat? So it's like.
You can't win.
Yeah, well, I can win. It's awesome for me, because I don't have to worry about all these little things. So I think probably the most romantic thing I ever did is fairly early when we were married. I wrote her a poem, not just a quick little poem, but it was like 2 pages handwritten.
Wow.
And it had lots of, it wasn't just little, it wasn't flowery. She does not like that kind of, Hallmark greeting card stuff. She does not like that. So it was full of little inside jokes that we have and some, vulgarity that is welcome between, husband and wife. And she just loved it, She still got that poem to this day. So I guess a vulgar poem was the best I could do.
I'm sure our listeners are going to take to that advice lightly, hopefully. It may not work in every situation, but we're glad it worked out for you there. Yeah,
I know. It's like, sometimes, like people say when they find out that I call the Evil Overlord her name, they go, God, how do you do that? Doesn't she hate your guts? And I'm like, no, she loves it because she knows it's right. She has this evil streak in her, where she likes to play pranks on people. She likes to mess with people. And so she's got that evil streak. So, hey, that's what I always warn people. Don't go out and, if you're in a new relationship, don't try to give your wife a nickname like this. It's probably not advisable, and it really, how we were talking about how to make things work, it really just depends on the person. Some wives might need that daily call. They might want it morning when you wake up and evening. If that's what they want, give it to them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what else are you doing? You're driving for 11 hours,
Right.
You might as well call them when they want to be called and keep them happy. Happy wife, happy life. But others, like the evil overlord, there's sometimes when, she gets in her schoolwork or whatever, we might not talk for a couple of days, and then she just, she'll call me up and say, hey, haven't talked for a few days. Oh, okay. Well, what's up? Oh, we've just been doing a lot of homework. Okay. Well, I got to go. It's just, it's just more laid back when you've been with somebody as long as I have. Yeah. Whereas if you're fresh into something brand new, you're going to have to be on that phone constantly with the woman. And you really need to, if you're in a new relationship, you need to make sure your spouse is okay with you being over the road. Mm-hmm. And you also have to be prepared that viewpoint may change once you're actually out on the road. You're out here, oh yeah, I'll be fine with that. It'll be good. You'll be making good money and everything. And then 6 months down the road, they're saying, the kids miss you. I miss you. This is not what I thought my life was going to be like. And now you're in a predicament. Okay, do I stay out on the road where I can make some money? Do I go local where I'm going to make less money, but I'll be home every night? Now you're in a pickle. So you just need to try to get all that stuff matched out before you start.
Very cool, yeah. So just, keep it real and try to adapt, I guess, to every relationship as to what it demands, right? It's pretty general advice, but...
Yeah, well, that's why it's general advice, because it works,
Yeah, hopefully, Great.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you'd like to let truckers know about your own podcast or anything else you've got going in the works, or just any closing statements?
Well, if people want to know what, if new truckers, people coming into the industry want to know what trucking is like and some of the aspects of teaming in it, I have written a book, called Trucking Life. And my other book, How to Find a Great Truck Driving Job, are both on Amazon or iBooks, wherever you want to get them. My podcast, I just talk about stuff that happens out here on the road. Some of it's having to do with relationships. And, I've got one, just because I got tired of explaining to people who the evil overlord was, I wrote one, TruckerDump 100, and, did a podcast on that called What Makes the Evil Overlord Evil. That's one of my most popular posts. So, yeah, pretty much everything I do, you can find me on abouttruckdriving.com, and there's a list of stuff I do. And, of course, I'm on Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll have all that linked below for all of our listeners here as well. But thanks, Todd, for coming on the show. That was a lot of great information, and hope you can serve basically as a shining example as to what truckers can aspire to for their relationships on the road, So thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right, again, a special thanks to Todd McCann for coming on the show. And we will have a link to Todd's podcast, his blog, and his ebooks below this episode or in the sidebar, wherever you're listening.
And so our next interview is with Steve Appilo. We actually worked with Steve in the past, and he's currently on the road with his girlfriend. And he has an interesting story on how he got involved in dating someone within the trucking industry. So let's listen to that.
How did you and your significant other first meet? We actually met at the Great American Truck Show in Dallas, Texas in 2014. We didn't actually start dating right away or anything like that. It ended up being at least probably early 2016 before we actually became a couple. We were just friends for a while. And then eventually things led to things and we got together. What was it like having a long-distance relationship, and how did you keep the spark there? I actually had experience with long-distance relationships in the past. When I was in college, I had been seeing the same girl for all 5 years of that, and that was at least 300 miles away. So, I mean, it was just kind of something that I was used to, and it wasn't really that difficult. I think the big thing is communication, and obviously, when you're have someone on the road, You can call each other and that kind of stuff. Just put a headset in and, you know, talk for hours on end or whatever. And so thankfully, cell phone plans have moved away from billing by the minute to giving you unlimited talking now, and then they just bill for data. So it actually works out. If you wanted to have a voice call with someone, you can talk for pretty much as long as you want and not have to pay anything extra. What advice would you give someone trying to maintain a long-distance relationship or a relationship with someone on the road a lot? I think the best advice I could give there would be sort of what I had said on the last question about communication. Just make sure that you are constantly in touch with each other, that you know what's going on in each other's lives, that you just make time to, you know, make the other person important. Even if you can't physically be there, having that, you know, at least emotional connection is still important to helping the relationship thrive. And then obviously make time to physically see each other as well. It's a little bit difficult when you have someone on the road and someone who has a stationary base of operations, but, you know, take time off from work and go out on a trip together or whatever. I mean, we basically found ways to make it work here and there, and she would be given home time and I would kind of rearrange my schedule to meet that, and we could go and, you know, do different stuff, and it was good. So I guess it's really what you get out of a relationship is whatever you're willing to put into it. They're not always just cut and dry and easy. Now that you're together, what is it like being on the road nonstop? It's actually really, really awesome, and I consider myself very fortunate in a number of ways. I work as a developer, so I'm able to do my job from pretty much anywhere, but the challenge is finding a company that is progressive enough to let you do that. I mean, obviously, you kind of have to prove you know what you're doing, you're not going to slack off, that you can actually get your work done. And then if you can find a company that is, you know, cool enough to give you that freedom to be able to travel and still, you know, make a living, then to me, it's one of the best things I've ever been able to do. So yeah, it's great being together, getting to spend time together, and then just enjoying traveling together. I've always wanted to go see new places and just never had an opportunity to do that, you know, working around the confines of a, you know, 1 week or 10 days of vacation a year. So this has actually been really, really cool to, you know, wake up in a different place every morning. And even if you spend some of it, you know, during your day in front of a computer, you know, work ends at 5 o'clock and then you can go do whatever. And depending on the time zone difference, I mean, if we're out west, the home base of operations for the company I work at is on the East Coast. So, you know, 5 o'clock on the East Coast is 2 in the afternoon on the West Coast. So, I mean, you still have plenty of day to go do what you want to do. So, yeah, it's been really, really awesome. What's the most romantic thing you've ever done for your significant other? I would probably say it was March of last year. I had scheduled like a weekend getaway in Las Vegas for her birthday, and she had really wanted to go see, there's a Cirque du Soleil show at the Bellagio called O, and it takes place in a swimming pool. So you've got the typical acrobats and, you know, crazy costumes and music and theming that goes along with any Cirque show, but this one has like the entire stage is a pool, but then it's got these platforms that can like sink and rise, and they do all these crazy stunts and stuff where it's sort of just an unreal experience. And from someone who comes from a technical background, you will find the rigging and the staging and all that kind of stuff, like the technical stuff that goes into making the show possible, almost as fascinating as the feats that the people are able to do. So it is just a completely mind-blowing experience on a number of levels. So I'd gotten her tickets to go see that show, and we basically had like a little weekend in Vegas for her birthday and got to see 2 shows. One was that and one was the Blue Man Group. And then we also went to this really awesome, it's called the Neon Graveyard, where they have like all the old like neon signs from Vegas, and it's like this little like lot where you can walk around and kind of see the history of it. It was really, really neat. Anything else you'd like to add? It's hard to say. I mean, I've pretty much covered all the main items. I mean, I'm sort of beating a dead horse, but communication is key for any of these relationships. And then also just flexibility. I mean, I used to be in an environment where I wasn't able to travel on a regular basis. I had the typical, 9-to-5 office job, and it wasn't quite working for where I wanted to go in life. And so some of the best advice I can give is, if something isn't working out for you, don't be afraid to take a risk and change it. Because, I mean, yeah, sure, some of the decisions you make in life may end up being mistakes, but you don't know unless you take that risk. And so I guess that's the best advice I can give somebody is just, go for it. I mean, what do you really have to lose? There's always going to be another place you can work. There's always going to be, other opportunities of things you can do. So just try and make the most of it, Be adventurous, take a risk.
Right, and so there you have it, folks. It's never a uniform experience for anybody. Dating can be a tricky thing, and especially marriage can be a wonderful commitment if you can make it work, like our friend Todd McCann.
For sure.
But yeah, I think the overall message that we heard from a lot of our interviews and a lot of our research here is just that, be authentic, be real, and try to build trust with someone working on the road, or if you're dating someone who's working on the road. It's all about sort of staying in contact with one another, keeping that romance alive however you can, and, really creating that understanding of what the profession entails when you are working such long hours and you're working in different states. It's really just important to establish all of that ahead of time.
Yeah, and it's important to know that there are a lot of options out there when it comes to finding a relationship. I know that's something many truckers are hesitant or apprehensive about, that it's too hard to find someone and they don't really know where to start, but I think we've provided a lot of great resources. And I wouldn't want to forget our very own. We have a blog titled Lover's Lane where many people have been interacting through the comments, and we always welcome you to hop on there, maybe find the one you're looking for via our comments section. If you Google trucking dating sites, that's going to be one of the first to pop up. So again, we'll leave it in the comments, but Lover's Lane is also a great place to find your next relationship.
That's right. It's a little unorderly because it wasn't intended to be any sort of dating site. It's just a blog that we have on AllTruckJobs.com, but by all means, interact on there and see if you can create any meaningful relationships. And if you do, feel free to drop us a line and let us know your experience. If you'd like to come on the show and talk about your success driving down Lover's Lane, we'd be happy to hear from you guys. But
I think we've efficiently spread the love this episode, Connor. Before we go, why don't we get into a fun topic or two?
Absolutely, as if this episode hasn't been one giant fun topic already.
That's true. Yeah, earlier in the podcast, we talked about finding a lover the old-fashioned way, and what better way to find someone than using a great pickup line. Connor, I know you've used them all the time.
They're foolproof. There's no way they can go wrong. You just write it down on your hand, and then when you see somebody attractive, you just go look at your hand and you say whatever's written there, and boom, you have a lifelong marriage and soulmate companion.
Exactly. So Connor and I picked out some of our favorite trucker pickup lines. So I guess I'll start things off, Connor.
Go for it.
Excuse me, I'm lost. Can you tell me which road leads to your heart?
Yikes. That's a good one, though. I'll give him that.
All right, let's see what you got, Connor. Wow me.
Do you believe in love at first sight, or should I drive around the block one more time?
Oh, I like
Zing,
that.
Zing.
You can roll up next to someone and throw that one at them.
Yeah, see, that one's great because, if you're in your truck already and then they just say no, then you just drive away. And there's nothing, you didn't lose or gain anything. You're just like, well, I'm going to keep driving then. If you did that in a real life situation. But anyway, what's the next one we got?
Yeah, I got one. This is a good one if you're broken down and might need some assistance from someone. You just walk up to and say, I need some coolant because you've got my engine overheating.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
I can just hear the sound of them melting, their heart melting.
I think that's just your engine block, actually.
That's true.
Huh. How about this one? This is a good take on a classic. Can I buy you a tank of gas?
Oh, I like that.
See, that's simple and straight to the point, but it's like,
yeah.
Then maybe if they're interested, they'll be like, no, but you can buy me a drink.
Yeah.
How about that? That one might actually work. I don't even know. There's no way to know until we try these out on the field. So
that's true. All right, I like this one. It plays up to the economy, and I think it's a good one. It's a very eco-friendly pickup line too. This one is, hey there. Since gas prices are so high, I think you should carpool with me to dinner tonight.
That's sensible. Again, sensible.
Exactly.
You're saving the environment and also stealing hearts or whatever kids say nowadays. Okay, here's the last one. And I like the setup on this one. Excuse me, ma'am. We're going to have to ask you to turn down the wattage on that smile. You're blinding other drivers.
I'm blushing myself right now, Connor.
So there you have it, folks. Our picks for the trucker pickup lines of the century. If you use any of these and they work, call us, let us know.
Yeah.
If they don't work, call us, let us know, and give us some credit.
All right, Connor, but I think that wraps things up. I think it was a great episode, and again, we hope you all find that special someone for Valentine's Day.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks, everybody, for listening to our Love on the Road episode. And next time, we're going to be entering into some March madness, talking about road rage and how to deal with that in the month of March. So stay tuned for the next episode, the next installment. But again, thanks for listening. I'm your co-host, Connor Smith.
And I'm your co-host, Troy Diffenderfer.
And this has been Big Rig Banter.
Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Big Rig Banter. For your next job, check out AllTruckJobs.com, the premier online source for finding the best driver jobs in the country. Browse hundreds of positions by freight or driver type to get back on the road with confidence. Click subscribe to keep the conversations coming. Until next time on Big Rig Banter.